Good morning and welcome to this Back to Schoology session. My name is Bradley Kemp, Senior Instructional Designer here at Schoology, and it's great to have you all with us today. This session is designed to help you get started in the platform, and this session is specifically for those of you in higher education institutions. To get started, this is going to be a nice collaborative session, and we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can from you all as we go through this session. This session can last anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, depending on the questions that are asked. My colleague here with me today, Michael Indeglio, is also on the line monitoring your questions. So let's give it a shot. In the control panel, you should see a place to ask questions. Those comments and questions go directly to myself and Michael. So as we get started here, and as we have a few people still logging in, let me know a couple of things. First of all, if you could let me know if you see my screen, that would be great. I have a presentation up. You should be able to see that. In addition, let me know if you are just starting with Schoology, if you went out and created your own account with the basic free version of Schoology, or if your organization brought in Schoology maybe this year or last year and created those accounts for you. That would be the enterprise version of the platform. And this will also give us an opportunity to try out that question area. Thank you, Christy. I'm glad you can see the screen. That means we'll be ready to get going here. And I'm looking over at the question panel myself, watching your questions come in. I see some people have been using the platform. Some of you are just starting off with it. I find that even when people have used the platform in the past, maybe they're self-taught, this session, although including things that they'll be familiar with, also include some new topics as well. Great, Doug, Kevin, Richard, Annette, great to have all of you with us today. Let's look at our agenda. We're going to look at the basic course setup, course configuration, things you will do once when your course gets set up, and you usually don't have to revisit those things. Organizing and sharing materials. I find organization to be the key component to allowing you to do more creative things later. Number 3 is where we'll spend the bulk of our time today, creating interactive activities in Schoology, things like assignments and discussions. With Schoology and its easy-to-use interface, what I hope you leave this session with is lots of ideas and creativity, ways you can run your courses in Schoology in new ways. I'm sure you all have also had conversations with fellow faculty members where they might have some grievances about having to log into some unknown system to upload a syllabus, not realizing that that system is actually a learning management system that has a lot of capabilities. With Schoology, we try to keep the threshold at a very inviting level so that you don't stop with simply uploading materials, but that you actually create interactive activities, things that can really transform the ways students can demonstrate their learning and collaborate with each other. We will tie up this presentation with a bow looking at scheduling work in the calendar and tracking work in the gradebook. 4 and 5 are actually pretty short topics. They go by pretty fast, but they really tie together all of the previous concepts. Let's get oriented here. If this is your first time with Schoology, let me break down the 3 main sections: courses, groups, and resources. Today we're focusing on the course area. This is where you develop all of your materials and enroll students. Groups and resources are an exciting part of the Schoology ecosystem, allowing for collaboration between yourself, students, simply faculty members, giving you the ability to have ongoing conversations and also to store curriculum and reuse it year after year in a seamless way. On Friday, if you're interested in those topics, join our other webinar, Next Steps with Schoology. Register in the same place you did for this webinar, and we'll be looking more at those topics regarding curriculum management, etc. That'll be an interesting time there. And I'll send you a link to where that sign up was. Now, in the beginning of this presentation, we have a couple of differences between the basic version of Schoology and the enterprise version. In the basic version, those of you who created your own account on Schoology.com, you create your own courses simply by clicking the courses drop-down menu and selecting Create, and you'll be prompted to enter in your course code and your section code, usually easily provided to you from your student information system or already on your syllabus. In the basic version of Schoology, those codes don't really matter too much. If you don't know them, don't worry about it. You can pop in whatever numbers you want there that are logical to you. And have your students join. They take that access code that's in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, and they simply go out to www.schoology.com. Hold on, let me type that website correctly. Schoology.com. Sign up as a student, and they can pop that access code in. If those students already have a Schoology account, they simply click on their courses drop-down menu and select that Join button right here and pop it in. Easy enough. However, things are a bit easier in the enterprise version of Schoology. As you can imagine, with the paid version of Schoology, we connect right into your student information system. Your course shells are created for you, and the student rosters are also dynamically created for you and kept up to date during the add drop period. In addition, students sign into Schoology instead of creating their own accounts. Those accounts are usually connected to your network IDs, so they have a single sign-on experience, a very simple workflow. Once you have that course going, we go through these 5 steps to get the course up and running. Basic setup here. Almost all of these are a one-time setup. After this webinar, you probably don't have to revisit this area again. At this point, we'll start jumping in from out of this presentation and directly into Schoology to see how things work. To get started here, let's look at Dr. Hughes' course in this English composition course. This course is halfway put together with some gaps in here that we will be filling in during the presentation, giving us an opportunity to learn some techniques. While seeming like a simple thing, I really encourage you at first just to go ahead and update that course picture. Often something left on people's to-do list, and then you go into the classroom or into the virtual classroom, and you have that sad gray book there. I always want to get that out of the way as soon as possible. Let's look at my files here. Here's a profile picture. Done. What I like about this is that also updates the picture in the drop-down menu and makes it easier for me as the faculty member to quickly find my courses. The other thing that helps me find my courses is to reorder this menu. If you're using the enterprise version of Schoology, your courses were loaded probably in a random order. They probably show in a random order here. So you can personalize that by clicking the up and down arrow. Let's move that course to the top for easy access. The next thing we want to do is visit your course options. For those of you who've used an LMS in the past, you may have been able to tweak certain configuration settings. This little drop-down menu here is easy to miss. I always like to point it out up front here. What we have in this drop-down menu, besides some helpful tools here like the recycle bin for keeping track of deleted items, the ability to send messages to others, the ability to view your course as other students, all really powerful tools. The thing I like to look at in the setup phase is this option, Edit Privacy and Course Settings. This controls the general privacy level of your course. Locking this down to the course level is not a bad idea. This is often set up for you beforehand in the enterprise version of Schoology. And then come down here and look at the other settings that control what students can edit and comment and post on. Often in higher education, these are opened up to everyone. However, if you are just getting started teaching online or facilitating an online course or a blended course, you might lock some of the posting and commenting abilities down to yourself. One less thing to keep track of. But there is not a hard rule either way. Some of you may have policies at your institution regarding or dictating what students should or should not be able to do in the LMS. So this could impact some of those settings. Don't forget to save your changes here at the bottom. The other thing I like to point out in this section, besides the ability to post, once in a while you may need to go back and check that students are following your online student agreements with engaging in virtual courses. In most higher ed organizations, students using the LMS do have to agree to certain rules. Under the Moderate tab, Schoology will list in this area all deleted posts. So if anything was ever written inappropriately or against your community guidelines, you would actually be able to see a record of all those posts, even if a student deleted it later. Clicking back onto the course title will bring us back to the main course page. So far we've looked at updating the course picture, reordered the courses, and verified student posting options. Let's now look at notifications. In your course, in the top right corner, you see a notifications button. This controls what email Schoology is going to send out of the system to you. These can be helpful if you only go into the system maybe once a week and want to know if students are posting assignments and things like that, posting comments. However, if you're going into the system every day, which many of you will be, those emails coming to you may be overwhelming, may just feel like spam, they may just be filling up some email filter you've set up. In that case, you can turn all of these off. Note that these settings are for you. They're person by person. It's not a bad idea to inform students of these choices as well. To look at notifications globally instead of course by course, click the drop-down arrow next to your name and you will see a notifications option. This will bring you to global notifications that you can set universally for all courses at once. Finally, last but certainly not least, we have the gradebook setup. Now, when we did this session yesterday, we did a session just like this last night. There were lots of questions about gradebook setup. People scoring against total points, lots of different avenues to go in. You could easily spend a whole hour doing a gradebook training, and we have some good resources on the gradebook out there that we can share with you. I'm going to stay high level here and point out the places you need to look at. Depending on your gradebook setup, you're probably all going to be doing very different things, but these are the areas you need to know about. Here we see our full gradebook. All graded materials will be showing in this grid here, with the scores being populated in the cells. There are a lot of filters and sorting options available to you here. But before you get to this point, you need to go to your grade setup. So you click Gradebook, then select the grade setup link beneath it. Here is where you set up your categories. If you're weighting those categories, you can put in the weights. Your scales, optionally add rubrics. The rubrics in Schoology are very powerful. A little bit outside the scope of this presentation, but if you are scoring against rubrics, I encourage you to look at that tool. I'm sure Michael can send you a link to some documentation and video we have on that. And then final grade settings. So let's break this down. Optionally weight your categories. You don't need to. Here's the button to turn that on and off. To add new categories, click the Add button. This is also where you'll find drop lowest options. Same goes with your scales and rubrics. Click the Add button to add additional scales. A benefit of the enterprise version of Schoology is that your admins, your tech admins, can set up scales for you that are universally available within your district. So for instance, here is a 4 to 0 scale, 4-point scale. That translates 2-letter grades. A big difference between the free basic version of Schoology and the enterprise version of Schoology is this grading period area. In the enterprise version of Schoology, this is going to be set up for you. This is most likely broken into semesters, possibly with sub-periods beneath it. Again, set up by your tech directors, people who implemented Schoology there. For those of you who set up a free account, you will need to set up grading periods for yourself. You'll actually see an Add button over here. Put in dates for things. Now, if you are setting up your own dates for the grading periods, some choose to instead make the end date for a grading period not the last day of class, but possibly the last day or a few days after final grades are actually due for you to put in the system. The grading periods control the archiving of this course, and things are a bit easier if you make that end date a little further out than needed. Schoology does save everything for you. You can always access archived materials, different conversation, but that's a helpful piece of information to know. Now here, everything we've covered so far with the categories and scales, it's fairly straightforward as long as you have a good grasp on how you do things presently. The final grade settings can be a little bit different than other systems you are used to. The scale here dictates how cumulative scores are shown over time. Schoology can always show ongoing, up-to-date cumulative scores for students so that there are no surprises. The scales available here are set from this scales area. So you can set up any scale to use in that scale area. Of course, with the enterprise version, that may be set up for you, but you'll probably still have to select it here. Down below, you have some column options. You can choose to override overall scores if needed. By default, you can't. Many of you may enable a total points column. Now, if you are just starting with Schoology, you may not be using the Schoology gradebook as a gradebook of record. You may just be doing certain digital activities and scoring things elsewhere, or scoring and collecting work in another system, maybe even in a spreadsheet, the old-fashioned way. I guess old-fashioned would be paper, but let's say, 2000s, 90s old-fashioned, if you will. There are visibility settings here. You do not want the ongoing score in Schoology, the cumulative score, to be inaccurate. However, if you're not scoring everything in Schoology, you run the risk of it being inaccurate. Here you have the option to hide those overall scores from the student view. Let's review what we've learned so far. We've changed the course picture. We reordered our courses. We verified some posting settings and some moderation settings. We set our notifications. And we've set up our gradebook. Let's break this down into steps. We added categories. We added scales, possibly rubrics. Those stars indicate defaults. You do not need to set this, but if you click the star, it will preload a category or a scale whenever you create new material, saving you a few clicks down the road. You verified your grading periods, possibly set them up if you are on Schoology Basic. Set your final scale based on the scales available. If you need to override scores, enter scores manually, you added those columns. In particular, some of you may be using the total points column. On the other hand, you may want to hide those overall cumulative scores from students, so students only see scores for individual items, not an overall running score. Okay. That's it for the course setup. A lot of things to go through, but we only need to do that once. I will say this, that you can change any of what we just showed you at any time. We recommend doing it first so you can have it done with. But any of those posting settings, the scales and categories, you can change that at any point while you're teaching. It won't affect anything, nothing will break anytime, and those will have immediate effect. So Michael, are there any questions at this point that we should pause and address? And of course we'll hang on at the end to answer questions as well, but anything we should address now? Great, thanks Michael. Let's look at actually organizing and creating material. I will confess to you that many years ago, about 15 years ago, I was that guy. I was that department assistant in the liberal arts group that formed a very jaded relationship with one copy machine in Boston, Massachusetts. This slide just makes me so happy, and I hope it makes you happy too. Well, this is just one of the first things you can do in Schoology is eliminate this thing from your life. So let's talk about organizing and sharing materials digitally with students, the very basic building blocks of your course. Now, of course, regarding copy machine, that has to do with brick and mortar teaching and learning. I would love to see in chat as I'm going through this, how many of you are not in a brick and mortar situation? How many of you are teaching in pure virtual classrooms, or how many of you are instructional designers responsible for setting up courses but not necessarily delivering them? That is always an interesting conversation, different perspective. We're going to look at creating folders here, adding files and links to those folders in a couple of different ways. Let's jump into the course. Click on Materials. This is where we organize everything. You'll see my course is already organized into a variety of folders. These folders, you should be able to see this on your screen, are unpublished, these ones in gray. That means my students cannot see those, allowing me to plan in advance, get a course set up without releasing the materials. Notice I have Essay 1 and 3. I'm missing the Essay 2 folder. Let's go ahead and make that and learn some techniques. Click Add Materials and Add Folder to get started. I'm going to pause here and jump right into a pro tip. When I click Add Folder, watch what happens. That folder is added to the bottom of my course. Now I could drag and drop it up to the appropriate place, no problem. But I want you all to save as much time as possible getting your courses set up. So instead of clicking Add Materials here, hover your mouse between the folders if you already have some folders set up. Or better yet, you could open a folder and hover your mouse inside of a folder. When you click the green dotted line within the course, you get the same menu as you get from the Add Materials dropdown. This allows you to create materials directly in the correct sequence. So I will add a folder this way and title the folder. You can optionally add a description in this area, and you can optionally change the folder color here. I mentioned publishing and unpublishing, making items visible or invisible to students. Note our setting at the bottom. I can make this unpublished. By default, everything is published in Schoology, so if you want something to be drafted, make sure to change that. And there we go, Essay 2, Tone and Nonfiction. If I ever need to change this, we click the gear icon and edit it, and there's my publish option as well. Note that this folder already has a lot of materials in it. I could publish or unpublish any of these individual items. A pro tip is publishing or unpublishing at the folder level will follow through to all of the items within it. Great time saver. Now, one thing missing from my orientation folder is the course syllabus. Let's upload a file to this course. Again, instead of clicking the Add Materials button, I click the arrow next to the folder, expanding it. At the top of the folder, I find that green dotted line, click it, and here we're going to add a file. Add file or link or external tool. Select File. Another efficiency here, if I have a lot of files I need to bring into this course, I do not need to do this one at a time. I could select several files at once if I wanted to, simply holding down Shift and selecting them. In this case, I'll simply select my syllabus. And again, this is automatically being published to students, which I could disable. And there we go. One nice thing about this is that it opens in the Schoology document viewer, allowing my students to download or print this at any time, but they don't need extra software simply to view it. This is also great on mobile. All of these documents they can also view on their smartphone or tablet, what have you. Now I could also do the same thing with links. Notice I have a link here to an MLA formatting guide from Purdue. Same idea, add materials, add file, or a link. Great for just pushing out reference material. There is one other option to bring files, to share files with students. It's worth taking a short look at the Schoology media albums. In this Essay 1 project, I want students to view a variety of photographs from the Library of Congress, some open materials that are within fair use in my course. If I have a variety of either photos, images, videos, or audio files, these rich media files, instead of adding them as a file one by one, I can create a whole media album to collect these files together. Let's do that now. You'll notice in some of the examples I'm sharing here that I am starting them with a naming convention. You see behind this screen I have E1 through E4. My folder is called SA1. While not required, of course, I'm a big fan of following a naming convention. So when I use these materials year after year or update them and resequence them, that I always know what sequence they originally went in. Okay? I always also find this helpful for your gradebook organization. Naming conventions in general are just a really good practice to follow. Click Create. And here I can add many files at once. So you notice these media albums you can reorder. Click into them and you get that media album experience, allowing you to scroll through these photos. And there is the whole unit with that album at the end. Let's take a quick review of everything we've learned thus far. We start by adding folders. Now my folders here were organized into units and lessons. It's worth noting that in higher education, many of you may choose to organize the folders by weeks instead, because your syllabus is really locked down in that sequence. I find units and subunits or lessons within those units also helpful, allowing for some flexibility there as well in terms of sequencing. Expand those folders. Yes, you can click into them, but I find expanding and contracting them gives you that bird's eye view. You can drag and drop any of those materials to reorder them, and clicking the green dotted line, that's your best friend, to add new items directly where they should be. You can publish and unpublish those materials, and this is a nice technique here that is shown in this screenshot. Even though my course is organized into units, well, after Unit 1, there's no reason that Unit 1 needs to stay at the top of my course. I can always move Unit 2 up, keeping the most relevant, the current topics at the top. For example, once SA1 is completed, I could publish SA2 and pull it up to the top of my course and move this orientation folder down to the bottom. Note that I can also reorder folders themselves. So maybe my course resources, well, that could have been in the orientation folder, and drag that right in. Very flexible, very quick and easy to reorder and change anything. Okay. All of that was one-way sharing with files, links, and media albums. This presentation, while I won't spend a lot of time in these slides, I like spending more time in the product. This presentation is uploaded to the control panel that you're seeing where you're typing questions to us. So you can download a PDF of this for your own reference and take away later. And I see Michael just shared a video describing some of the elements in the doc viewer. A lot of possibilities here, including annotation tools and things like that that are a little bit outside the scope of this presentation, but great to know about as a next step. Now let's roll up our sleeves and get into some more interesting stuff, creating interactive activities. If everything thus far was one-way sharing from the teaching faculty to students, let's talk about two-way sharing, opportunities for students to interact with each other and to share work with you. First two items we want to look at are discussions and assignments. What's the difference? discussions are collaborative. These are threaded discussion responses that can be used in a variety of ways. For instance, a discussion does not need to be used just for a discussion. Think of using it for any time you want students to share with each other. Looking to do peer review? Use a discussion to allow students to upload work for each other to review and comment on. Assignments, on the other hand, are just between the professor and the student. You can have co-administrators in your course. For instance, if you have a TA review assignments. Absolutely acceptable. Assignments are shared between students and any administrators in the course. This is an example of a discussion thread where we have our prompt at the top and then a place to respond down below. We talked about sharing files and links and things like that in our previous discussion. Note that when this student responds to this discussion post, besides the text area, she also has these attachment icons. She can upload a file, attach a link. This is a resource button that can connect to her Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive. In the enterprise version, you will also get this fourth icon, the microphone, which will open up her webcam or her audio. I know a lot of music professors who use this for dictation, for music dictation homework. This is also very popular with language teachers, as you can imagine. Again, let's talk about mobile for a second. The mobile experience here is really terrific because it opens up the camera on the user's phone. Those are usually high quality cameras and really easy to use, easier than the web interface. So if you're looking to do heavy multimedia assessments in your course, I really encourage you to take a look at the mobile app and imagine the possibilities there. This is a sample of an assignment from the student view. Notice that they have a big submission button there. Uploading files, drafting files directly in Schoology are options. They also have audio-video recording tools there as well, also available on mobile. This also gives you a host of annotation tools with written assignments, so you can mark up work with a virtual red pen and provide immediate feedback without the use of paper. Again, in that YouTube video that Michael shared recently. This comment box in an assignment, I'd like to clarify. In a discussion, there is a comment area here. This is a threaded discussion where students can correspond with each other. This assignment area with the comment box, comment area is really used for clarification. If students are confused about the requirements, they can post questions to you here. When you respond, the whole class gets the response. So you've solved a possible communication problem very quickly and easily. You can also turn this comment box on or off, which you may want to do if you are putting together self-paced courses that may not have active facilitation or moderation. Let's take a look at creating those. I'm going to create an assignment and a discussion, and we'll see some different features in both. Let's bring our orientation folder back up. Because Schoology is discussion heavy, I really want to create a discussion about discussions. Clicking the green dotted line, I'll select Add Discussion. Similar to the media album, we're creating a title, and here the instructions are important, obviously. What I expect students to do and how I expect them to respond. In this particular example, they're going to watch a TED Talk with a public broadcasting host talking about the art of discussions and question asking and listening. All great stuff. This video is on YouTube. When I want to add additional materials to items, we have two options. We'll see these same options available when we create an assignment in a moment. We can add material here. These are the same tools that students have when they respond to discussions as well. We can attach files and links. Now this is a great tool because this means that the thing we learned earlier where we can upload files, how I uploaded the syllabus, those are freestanding materials. However, if I'm providing materials that have an explicit relationship to an assignment, I can attach them directly to that work, keeping all of that work and the resources needed to do that work contained. This really helps me, not only helps the students, but helps me reuse this course year over year too, because all of those resources are not free floating, they're all connected to the assignment. However, in this case, I want a YouTube video. I want this video to be played within Schoology. So instead of attaching something to the bottom of this document as a supplemental resource, I would like that discussion to be right in here in the middle of the description. In this case, I'm going to use one of my favorite buttons in Schoology, Insert Content. This allows you to insert a variety of things into Schoology. If you're familiar with using Embed Codes, this is what you would use. Also, for those of you teaching foreign languages or teaching any mathematics, this is where you'll find equation editors, a LaTeX tool, symbol editors, and things like that. In this case, I want to add a video. I'm going to select Image and Media. I could upload images and videos here if I have them on my desktop, or I can bring them in directly from the web. Now, this video, this TED Talk here, is on the web. So I'm going to look for a share button, either grab a share URL, or better yet, look for an embed code. If you're not familiar with embed codes, I encourage you to do some research on this and check out these techniques on your own. Because this is a video, I'm going to select Media and simply paste the embed code. And you will see a yellow box added here, which I could resize if I wanted to. That's the placeholder for the video. Let's save our changes and see what happened. There's my new discussion. Opening it up, we see the video embedded nicely within the discussion with a place for myself and students to comment below. So quick and easy to make those discussions. Now let's pivot and create an assignment, and we'll see an almost exact parallel experience. Moving essay 1 back to its original position, let's add this assignment here. Adding it directly in the sequence I want it using the green dotted line, I select Add Assignment. And here, the title, again using a naming convention that I've set up, an optional best practice, and specific instructions. Now for this, I need them to reference some materials. This is really common in an assignment that you're giving some sort of handout, a reading or something like that. And maybe it's a link to a website, but very often it's a Word document, it's a PDF you've already prepared. Let's select a file. Going back to my resources, here are my guidelines for this presentation. This is also a good technique if you're just getting started with a learning management system. You don't need to necessarily recreate all your materials, building them in these descriptions. If you already have PDFs and Word documents describing projects, you can simply have descriptions that say, See attachment for instructions. And we'll click Create. Here is the class presentation. And as students submit their work, they will show up here for me. I can select that work and score it. Also use the annotation tools to provide feedback, etc. Those are all included in the links Michael is sharing with you now if you want to know more details about those. Let's review what we've learned so far. Assignments and discussions look almost identical from what we've seen so far. You can attach items using those bottom icons. The third icon allows you to connect to your Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive or Dropbox, etc. If you're already putting a lot of materials in the cloud, no need to do it again. We can connect to those. If you're using the enterprise version of Schoology, you can use that microphone icon to add audio and video, recording directly into the platform without the need for extra software and tools. Think of that as almost micro lecture capture, if you will. Using the toolbar at the top, insert content allows you to add supplemental materials like images and embedded video, embedded content directly inside of the description. That gives you some aesthetic choices. How do you want that presentation to really look to? Is it attached at the bottom like this Word document? Or is this a piece of media that could be embedded right into the description, enhancing the look and feel of the assignment? So how do we choose what to use? Informational items, when you're just pushing content to students, folders, files and links, and media albums. Great for just simply curating material. When you really get into the essence of what a learning management system is, we think about the interactive materials. Discussions for brainstorming, peer review, for flipping a classroom, for putting that lecture online, using assignments for simply paperless homework, but also multimedia projects using some of those tools available on the mobile app. Tests and quizzes, which are outside of the scope of this presentation, this is where you will find multiple choice questions, true-false questions, all of those assessment questions that do grade themselves. While a different topic entirely, I encourage you to get into test and quiz questions if you're looking to create some major efficiencies in your classroom. By the way, if you're coming from another LMS, yes, you can import your Blackboard quizzes and anything in common cartridge format as well into our test quiz engine. So let's tie these concepts together in the time we have remaining. And as I said in the beginning, these are really short concepts, easy to implement, but make a huge difference, so worth their own points here. Scheduling work in the calendar. Schoology's calendar is directly tied to the due dates of items. This bottom section of the creation panels is something we haven't looked at yet. So let's take a look. We stopped at creating this assignment. What's missing is information on when this assignment is due. Clicking the gear icon allows us to edit any materials. Big picture takeaway, anytime you're trying to do something, looking how to publish, edit, etc., look for a gear icon on the page. It'll probably take you to where you need to go. Scrolling down, we see a place to enter a due date. Let's make that due tomorrow. Let me see in chat if you are someone who does not accept late work. In almost all higher ed institutions, you do not accept late work unless you are my freshman philosophy professor who took great pity on me after a substantial amount of begging and pleading After you set a due date, if you do not accept late work, let me bring your attention to some of these options below. These allow you to turn certain features on and off in any Schoology material. Your options here will vary from material to material. For instance, that comment box we looked at earlier, I could turn that off here. If it's gray, it's disabled. If I do not accept late work, you may want to look at this locking feature. This is due on the 17th. Well, I could lock it the next day manually, or I could schedule this to automatically lock on 8/18 and set that for midnight. This will prevent students from uploading any extra work. End of conversation. Save my changes. We see that both of those are now displayed with the item, but more importantly, if I go back to my materials area, my students will now see this in the upcoming calendar. Clearly communicated. Even better, we return to the home screen, and both you and the students will see all of their coursework coming up in that upcoming section, all in one place, clear as day. You can also view everything you've scheduled thus far in your global calendar, available on the home page. Everything will be listed here, and better yet, you can drag and drop items on this calendar to update the due date or to change the due date, etc. This is automatically reflected in everyone's calendar. So a really important topic, but a quick one. The other thing we like to tie with a bow at the end of this presentation is clarifying how we connect everything to the gradebook that we set up in the beginning of this presentation, bringing us full circle. Again, the key is in that bottom area of the setup screen. While I'm in the calendar, I'll simply click on this assignment. Instead of navigating through the course and through the folders, I'll simply click on the assignment and jump directly to it. Clicking the gear icon, we edit it. And down below, we see options for categories. These are the categories that we set up in the beginning. You can optionally make things ungraded if, for instance, if this is just ongoing journal writing. Our scales and rubrics. If you are using rubrics, I encourage you to select Create New and check out our rubric editor. And because these two are set, we will be able to grade the submission when it comes in. We'll be able to grade that directly from the submissions area or navigate to the Schoology gradebook and enter grades here as well. Either typing them in if you're using a numeric scale, using a rubric to point and click. Here's an example of a different rubric. Okay, or using any scale that you set up. And those points are immediately shared with the students as well. If you're looking to release items later, you can always publish and unpublish materials later. If you want to score everything and then release them at once, simply unpublish the assignment, score everything, and republish to release those scores. And that brings us to the end. By the way, this screenshot is simply an example of a graded discussion. Don't limit your grading simply to assignments. Check out graded discussions too. A really terrific feature. If you're ever having trouble with the gradebook or want to get a bird's eye view of everything you've put in there, I always like to show this bulk edit option in the gradebook. Simply click the three dots at the top and select bulk edit. This will save probably 80 to 90% of all questions you are going to bring to your IT IT team if you just take a look at that bulk edit option, which gives you a bird's eye view of everything in the course. Thank you all for staying with us today. For those of you who are running off and maybe enjoying those last sips of lemonade this summer, cheers to you. For those of you already in the thick of teaching and learning, have a great time. And now Michael and I will stay on the line for a few minutes and answer any other questions that have come up during the session.